What's up, everybody? Welcome into the SFS channel. My name is Gavin, and in this episode, I'll be talking through some Week 11 lineup tips, talking through 5 names that I'll be starting in some deeper formats this week, some players that have some nice upside and can potentially hit on their ceilings for this week's game. So, as always, I'll be posting my other start-sit episodes for running backs and receivers. Make sure to check those videos out after you're done watching this one and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. With that said, let's dive right on in. All right, as we always do, I'll be recapping my picks from the week prior. So for the running back position last week, we went 3 out of 5 of our picks and nearly went 4 out of 5. We actually had Leonard Fournette miss his threshold by half a fantasy point, also leaving that contest in the fourth quarter with a hit point or so. Dang close there. Our hits this past week were Jamal Williams, Deontay Foreman, and Tony Pollard, all eclipsing the half PPR threshold of 10 points. Our miss of the week, again, in addition to Leonard Fournette, barely missing that, was Cordero Patterson in a situation I was very surprised to see him limited in the way he was, under a 40% snap count percentage. The team never really made a true and concerted effort to run the football with him, and then he also was just ineffective. So at the end of the day, pretty good week there for the running back position. Let's get into week 11 now. Tony Pollard, again, we are going back into the well at Minnesota. I believe this is a game in which Dallas needs to continue putting an emphasis on running the football. Both teams are coming off of highly emotional overtime performances. For the Vikings, I think they might be a little bit high in the sky here with the fact that they just pulled off the upset of their year against the Buffalo Bills. And on the other side, you've got the hungry Dallas Cowboys, who unfortunately dropped a game for them at Lambeau Field in which they really controlled up until late in that contest. So I think you've got kind of two opposite ends of the spectrum here. One team riding the low lows and the other team riding the high highs. And again, I do think that both of these teams should be fairly tuckered out and a bit fatigued heading into this contest, playing some additional minutes and obviously having those very dramatic finishes here. So for Tony Pollard taking on the Vikings, he's coming off of a career-high workload, 25 touches on 28 opportunities, 128 scrimmage yards, and having a 20.3-point fantasy performance in half PPR. Awesome things across the board here. And with Zeke's health still being a bit sketchy heading into this week, the reports and the expectations from Coach Jerry Jones, and I say that jokingly, yes, I know Mike McCarthy is their coach, is that he expected Zeke to play. He wasn't able to. The knee was just a little bit too much for him to overcome here. So I'm certainly not betting against Pollard or betting in favor of Zeke in potentially his first game back here coming off of that injury. I expect another 15 or so touch game from Tony Pollard, and of course, efficiency is just kind of part of the recipe and formula that we see from Pollard in these matchups. So additionally, Minnesota is an average matchup for opposing fantasy running backs, meaning that they allow fantasy running backs to score close to their average points per game heading into the contest. So if Tony Pollard can just do that, he's going to be more than enough to be a top 24 running back for this week. Cordero Patterson, I'm ready to be hurt again. I'm going to dive back into the well one more time here and put my faith in CPAT to be a top 24 back for this week's games. Cordero in Atlanta versus Chicago is the matchup this week, and the Chicago Bears, plain and simple, have not been able to stop anybody since their mid-season trades near the deadline. Roquan Smith and the pass rusher, man, I'm really forgetting his name, Robert Quinn. I was going to say I can literally see his face in my mind right now. The words were just not coming out there. Since moving those two pieces, this defense has really regressed. And, before that, they weren't that amazing of a defense to begin with. This is a defense that allows opposing fantasy running backs to score above their fantasy average throughout the season, and that's what we're looking for here with CPAT. He disappointed last week. The opportunities weren't there, and it is somewhat of a red flag that he's had below a 40% snap count percentage in his first 2 games back here. But what I'm betting on is increased efficiency, having some more opportunities. I'd be surprised to see him not see his workload increase this week. And this is week 3 coming off of the IR. You're really going to see what he is and isn't in this game. And I do think that it is better than what we saw in the second performance, so being last week, but not nearly as good as what we saw in his first game back where he scored 2 touchdowns. So I expect his value to kind of settle somewhere in between. He's a lower end RB2 for me. And I do think that this is a matchup, though, where with the bye weeks you have this week, missing some top end players, your Kenneth Walkers, Travis Etienne's of the world, Fournette's out right now, you could use some extra and additional help in lineups for this week's games. Antonio Gibson. So now really getting into some players that I've been kind of crushing on here and just kind of bashing on in the last few months, for a matter of fact. So Antonio Gibson Gibson and Brian Robinson are two players that I do think have a nice chance at Houston this week. The easiest matchup for opposing fantasy running backs to find success in this week's games. Gibson and B-Rob are both coming off of impressive performances against Philadelphia with a 52% snap count percentage going Gibson's way, 48% of the opportunity heading to Brian Robinson. They both scored double digits. They both had a touchdown in this game. So it's clearly a split backfield, but with the matchup on the table, either of these players could go out there and have nice ceilings in this week's matchup. And of course, suffice for the absence of some other running backs you may have due to bye week here in week 11. David Montgomery, Chicago taking on Atlanta, another favorable matchup on the ground for opposing fantasy running backs. Atlanta, in terms of rushing yards allowed, hasn't been terrible throughout this point in the year. Now they're trending down after letting Carolina have 2 monster games against them. But at the end of the day here, the Chicago Bears team is a rushing offense, and Khalil Herbert just got put on the injury reserve, which is huge news for David Montgomery. We could see his touches jump from the low teens anywhere up to 18 to 24 touches a game and see some of the work that's similar to the past couple of seasons where he's been a true workhorse for this offense. So I'm excited about the next month of David Montgomery with Herbert landing on the injured reserve. He has a very easy schedule, which kicks off here against Atlanta this week. Again, this is a rushing offense. Justin Fields is going to take his carries. They're both going to be touching the football on the ground a lot. They're not a high-volume passing offense. I actually just looked today. Justin has not thrown 30 passes once in a game yet this season, so this is clearly the emphasis and focal point of this offensive attack. And again, this is an above-average matchup against Atlanta for the Chicago offense. I think Montgomery's stock is definitely trending up right now. And then finally, number 5 here, Isaiah Pacheco, Kansas City on the road against the LA Chargers. This has been a great matchup for opposing fantasy running backs all season long. We saw both Elijah Mitchell and Christian McCaffrey have success on the ground last week. And for Pacheco here, this is a player that I think firmly took grasp of the lead rusher role in this offense, having 16 touches on the ground last week without the presence of another significant threat on the ground. Clyde Edwards-Hilaire's stock has been plummeting the last 3 weeks. His snap count percentage dipped as low as 6% this past week's game. I think it went 27 down to 17 down to 6. And then Jerick McKinnon is the clear leader in the pass catching component, with him having, I believe it was 6 receptions for 53 yards. That is totally me pulling that off the top of my head. I didn't write that down in my notes for today. I can go and pull that up as we continue talking through the situation here for Isaiah Pacheco. But the key here for Pacheco for me is if I'm gambling on a touchdown being scored by a running back in Kansas City this week, it's on Pacheco. With that much of a control and dominance on Pacheco's, use as the lead rusher for this team, there's no reason not to like him as a fringe top 24 player for this week's game. I think that there's a lot to like here and a lot to be excited about. I was very close on Jerick McKinnon's stat line. So he had 8 targets, 6 receptions, so we nailed that part, off by 3 yards. He had 56 yards receiving, not 53. So even slightly better than my expectation was for him. That happened. I mean, it was just recalling information from my memory there. But I do like Pacheco in this game. This is the first time I've really felt solid about him as a starter in a weekly matchup. And I do think that efficiency can be on the table. If he gets between 15 and 20 overall touches, that's great. And at the end of the day, if you're getting that level of use, that's something to like and something to feel at least comfortable enough to lean your hat on here. He did lead the team with a 56% snap count percentage in this past week's matchup, so a little bit more to like there. Jerick McKinnon had a 38% snap count percentage in that game. So it looks as if Pacheco has taken over the lead for this team, and that's where we're really resting our faith in here for week 11. So to recap, Tony Pollard at Minnesota, I'll be starting this week. C-Pat at home against Chicago. Antonio Gibson and or Brian Robinson at Houston, extremely good matchup there. Montgomery at Atlanta, no Khalil Herbert, increased workload for him, that's critical. And then Isaiah Pacheco, what looks to be his breakout game. Now he's not an elite ceiling player, but I do think that floor value is certainly rising here. He is at Los Angeles for week 11. So as always, if you guys enjoyed, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, turn the bell on so you're never late for a new piece of content. And one more time, check out our other lineup advice videos. We got 3 more of them coming your way today, and I'll see you there. Peace out.